how does a living thing eat without a mouth? It seems like a total paradox, but you know what? Our cells have figured out a really elegant solution to this exact problem. And this process, it's happening inside you right now, billions of times over.
So, the answer to that question is a process called endocytosis. You can think of it as the cell's way of literally reaching out and pulling the outside world in. It's kind of like a master key that unlocks all the resources a cell needs to survive.
Now, here's the cool part. Endocytosis isn't some one-size-fits-all deal. Nope. The cell basically has two very different doors for brain stuff in. One is for eating solid things, and the other is for drinking liquids. And each door leads down a totally different path for a very different purpose. First up, let's look at how a cell eats a solid meal. This is where things get really active, really targeted. We're not talking about passive absorption here. We're talking about the cell acting like a microscopic hunter. The name for this is phagocytosis, which literally means cell eating. And it's not a passive thing at all. The cell actively hunts down and engulfs these big targets. I want you to imagine it like a tiny microscopic security guard and cleanup crew all rolled into one, just gobbling up everything, from invading bacteria to old broken cell parts. And this whole process, it's a very deliberate, multi-step hunt. First, the cell has to make contact with its target. Then, and this is the wild part, it extends these incredible false feet, they're called pseudopods, to wrap completely around it. These arms fuse together, trapping the particle in a little bubble called a phagosome. You can think of that phagosome like a temporary stomach, where the cell brings in the big guns to digest its meal. This process is absolutely crucial for our immune system. I mean, we have specialized white blood cells that are doing this constantly, hunting down and destroying bacteria and viruses. They are, quite literally, the frontline security guards of our entire body. Okay, so that's eating. Now let's switch gears and see how a cell drinks. If phagocytosis is this big, targeted hunt, pinocytosis is, well, it's more like taking a casual sip of whatever is around. It's a much more relaxed process. So pinocytosis, or cell drinking, is way less dramatic. The cell isn't hunting for a specific target anymore. Instead, it's just constantly sampling the fluid around it, taking in a tiny gulp of that liquid, along with any dissolved nutrients that happen to be floating in it. So instead of reaching out with those big arms, the cell surface just dips inward. It creates this little pocket. This pocket fills up with fluid from the outside, and then it just pinches off, forming a tiny little bubble or vesicle inside the cell. See? It's a much simpler, more routine kind of action. And this constant sipping, it's happening in countless cells all over your body all the time. It's providing a steady stream of vital nutrients, things like sugars and ions. It's basically how our cells stay fueled up and ready for whatever they need to do. All right, let's put these two processes side by side so we can make the differences totally crystal clear. This is where you really see just how different the cell's strategies for eating and drinking truly are. Okay, check this out. You can see the fundamental differences at a glance, right? Phagocytosis for big solid stuff, while pinocytosis for fluids. The way they do it is completely different too. One is an active, aggressive engulfing, the other is just a passive little fold of the membrane. And that difference shows up everywhere, in the size of the bubbles they form, and even in how specific the process is. Eating is a targeted event. Drinking is just a continuous, general process. So here's the main takeaway. If it's a big, solid particle that the cell has to deal with specifically, like an invading bacterium, it eats it with phagocytosis. It is a very deliberate act. And on the flip side, if the goal is just to absorb the fluid and nutrients floating around in a general, routine way, the cell drinks it using pinocytosis. It's really the cell's way of just staying hydrated and nourished. So all this microscopic mealtime stuff is cool, for sure, but why does it actually matter to us on the big scale? Why is it so important to understand how our cells are eating and drinking? Well, these processes are, and this is not an exaggeration, the bedrock of our health. Our entire immune system relies on phagocytosis to hunt down and destroy invaders. Our cells depend on pinocytosis to absorb the nutrients that fuel them. And our bodies use phagocytosis as a microscopic cleanup crew, constantly clearing away dead cells and debris. This isn't some rare event. It's happening billions of times every single second, inside every one of us. So that leads to a final question.
what happens when a cell loses its appetite? When these absolutely fundamental processes start to fail, the consequences can be devastating. We're talking about things ranging from autoimmune disorders to cancer. Understanding how our cells eat and drink isn't just some curious science fact. It's one of the keys to unlocking new treatments for some of our most challenging diseases. And it really makes you wonder, what other secrets are hidden in that microscopic world within us?